Mr. Gonzalez is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you, Secretary, for being here with us today. We really appreciate having this conversation. I'm going to continue on an issue that's been a concern for this committee on both sides of the aisle. As you know, adversaries like Russia and China, Iran, North Korea, and others have been working to replace and circumvent and undermine the U.S. dollar for decades now. But now we're also seeing calls to reduce the dependence on the U.S. dollar from corners of the globe, including allies of ours like France and maybe India and others more recently. From your perspective, what is the biggest risk to the U.S. dollar? Is it global geopolitics, or is it concerns here in the U.S. Capitol of not being able, of U.S. Politics, not being able to pass a debt limit, for example, this past week?
Well, I have previously and will again express my concerns about the debt limit. The dollar is used widely as a reserve asset because of the depth and liquidity of U.S. capital markets, the safety of Treasury securities, and the longstanding practice of the United States to honor its obligations. And it's that commitment that we can be trusted to pay our bills that is the foundation for our high credit rating and for the dollar's role as a reserve currency. So when we have episodes like the debt ceiling episode, that concerns me. Of course, our sanctions are in part enabled by the important role of the dollar and U.S. banks in the financial system. We work whenever possible with other countries.
But if I may, should we be more concerned now in slapping sanctions on countries around the world and taking that into consideration and be more thoughtful as we may be creating a paranoia around the world where people are looking for other currencies to do transactions?
It is true that when we impose sanctions, countries that are afraid they can be the subject of those sanctions are motivated to look for other tools other than the dollar to engage in transactions. So
but even
that's
our
something
friends,
we have to accept. It is much more difficult to find other tools to make payments, other currencies, when we work jointly with
But we even
partners.
have our friends like France also looking for other currencies and pushing it.
You know, France and some of our allies were not happy when we pulled out of JCPOA and imposed sanctions. And I would say there is virtually no meaningful workaround for most countries for using the dollar as a reserve currency.
Very well, and I understand earlier you made some statements about it being the most stable option with the rule of law and liquidity and all
Yes.
that. But isn't it the fact that the use of the dollar has diminished and gone down against competing currencies over the years?
There's been some increase in holdings of other reserve assets, but that's something to be expected in a growing world economy where there is a desire to diversify, but
so we should expect less use of the dollar, is what you're saying. We should anticipate.
We should expect over time gradually increased share of other assets in reserve holdings of countries. It's a natural desire to diversify, but the dollar is far and away the dominant reserve
It's still
asset.
a huge concern for us here in Congress. And just changing gears briefly, under the new minimum tax system, lawmakers permit companies to reduce their taxable income by the amount of their depreciable deductions. Companies in most capital-intensive industries with high value of tangible property can claim these depreciation deductions and use tax deferral to invest in their business. This provision was included in the Inflation Reduction Act to protect companies from the potential impact of book minimum tax by not capitalizing investment. However, these deductions are not accessible to oil and gas producers because of their capital expenditures are classified as intangible drilling costs, within the different section of the tax code. Due to this designation, oil and gas producers are unfairly targeted. I hope you can.
Gentleman's time has expired.
We're hugely concerned, and we'd love for you to be able to address this to our office.
And the Secretary